I hope whenever you're watching this, you're having a good day. My name is Gavin Palazzo, and I will be presenting my paper, which was on the costs and benefits of defunding the police. Now, police brutality and police violence is not a new issue that we are facing. This has existed in the U.S. for several decades, and we have had no luck in solving this issue. However, it came to a peak within the last year when we saw the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. These killings caused nationwide protests and several riots and had millions calling for police defunding and radical changes to our criminal legal system. The policy that aims to make these changes is the BREATHE Act. Now, this is a large policy. It calls for changes on federal, state, and local levels. Some of the changes it wants to make are eliminating federal programs such as the DEA and ICE. They also aim to offer grants to incentivize states to shrink their criminal legal system, and also calls for the removal of armed officers from school campuses. Now, since this is such a large policy, my paper focuses on the police defunding as well as changes in the educational system. For my paper, I looked at these effects on a local level. I chose my hometown of Indio, California. This picture you see here is from the Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival, one of the biggest festivals in the world. We are a relatively small city. However, we do have a rapidly growing population, and during these peak tourist times, the number of people we have in our city grows immensely. However, we have a rather small police force. We have about 0.67 officers per 1,000 people, which is well below the national average of 2.4 officers per 1,000 people. We are also consistently above the average violent crime rate. We have been above this average between the years of 2002 and 2018. Now, some of the past literature that has been done on these issues. First off, we have Becker. Becker was one of the first papers to look at issues of crime from an economic standpoint and apply theories such as rationalization and utility maximization into why people commit crimes. This paper looks at optimal approaches to punishment and is aimed at the most socially cost-effective ways to handle crimes. Next up, we have Russian and Mikulski. This is a relatively recent paper that looks at the training disparities of police forces and some of the possible effects that we can look to see from police defunding. They argue that we can expect police privatization as well as a possible increase in police brutality due to a further disparity in training between forces due to a lack of funding. Next up, we have Bowles and Garopa. They looked at corruption in police forces. They looked at the risk assessment that goes into criminals offering a bribe as well as police accepting a bribe. They believe that the risk premium has to be greater than the punishment that an officer can get for a bribe. However, this risk premium can be lowered if funding for police departments is lowered. And last up, we have Lynn. This paper looks at the relationship between police size as well as the crime rate. It finds that as the number of officers increase, the number of crimes decreases. Next up are some of the papers on education. First up, we have Weisbert. This paper looked at armed officers on schools and found that there was an inverse relationship between the number of officers and student success rates. This does not just apply to officers on campus. Gershenson and Hayes looked at Ferguson when there were protests going on due to the shooting of an unarmed black teen, and found that these protests caused by police brutality caused student success to drop. Bowling, Boylan, and Kirkby looked at how an income tax cap in Indiana affected schools. They found that schools that were in lower income areas received major loss of fundings, since income tax is a primary source of funding for schools. And Hyman shows that schools with more funding, uh, those students go on to have a higher graduation rate and a higher college application and acceptance rate as well. I got the different budgets for Indio from their proposed 2018-2019 budget. I got the population statistics from the United States Census Bureau, and I got crime statistics off of citydata.com. Unfortunately, California does not have any agencies that provides crime statistics to the FBI's UCR and IBRS reports. And I also used data provided by McAllister, French, and Fang, where they found the tangible, intangible, and total costs of different crimes. For the methodology for my paper, I did a simple cost-benefit analysis. My variables were on crime rate and education, and I used the findings from McAllister, French, and Fang, Lin, and Mello to evaluate these costs and benefits. This graph comes from Mello. It shows how as the number of police per 10,000 people increases, our crime cost per capita will decrease. So any reduction to the police size here in Indio is going to cause an increase in the crime cost per capita. It's also going to cause an increase in crimes, as shown by Lin. And with total violent crimes equaling over almost $10 million in cost to society, the increase in crimes is going to cause a massive increase in the costs that the city will have to face. However, defunding will free up funds to go towards infrastructure and education. Now, Indio has a $28 million annual police budget. So this will free up a huge portion of funds that can be spent towards bettering the city and closing the inequity between school districts. And when it comes to education, as shown by Weisbert, having armed security on campus actually